And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you so much for joining us for our unique podcast community where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. And thank you so much for helping us grow. We just hit 1,846 subscribers, and we grow every day thanks to people like you who watch our content. Please remember to like our videos, and remember to subscribe on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. We love it when you like and share our videos, and it helps our community grow. To see our over 270 past episodes, check out our website at www.jasontram.net. Again, that's www.jasontram with two M's.net. And we feature artists from the classical, the opera, the contemporary, the indie singer-songwriter, the rock band world music artists, concerto soloists, and everything in between. So thank you so much for joining us. We have a wonderful guest today. We have Madison Marie McIntosh, a dynamic mezzo-soprano on the rise, who has she's been singing all over the regional scene, is making some great music. She's won some great awards. We're going to talk about that today. Welcome, Madison.
Hello, Jason. Thank you very much for having me on this amazing podcast.
I'm so glad you're here. And we never actually officially met, but we missed each other by day, and I got to hear you sing, and we have lots of mutual friends. So I was at the Phoenicia Festival working on the Sunday show, or you were on the Saturday cast, and I saw the production loaded, and I heard a little bit of singing, but I've heard nothing but glowing comments about your singing, and I've listened to your online recordings, and I really love what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Jason. I really appreciate that.
Did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
Yes, I fell in love with opera when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, so to speak. My parents would play recordings of various genres, everything from opera to the Beatles. And of course, I was too little to remember this now, but when I would sit in my high chair, I would be enthralled if I would hear Pavarotti or Beverly Sills on PBS. And eventually, when I was in kindergarten, I started to attempt to imitate opera singers. And although I thought that I sounded pretty good, I must have sounded pretty horrible. But every morning when my class would sing the national anthem, I would sing in my so-called opera voice, much to the consternation of my classmates.
So you were a shy child growing up, I assume.
Oh, yes, very shy. No, I would embarrass my poor parents by singing very, very loudly in the congregation at church. But they put up with me.
Now, were you a soloist at church and choir in school at a young age?
Yes, I sang in the choir when I was still pretty little. And when I was 10 or 11, I started to sing solos in church, and then when I was 12, I started to be a junior cantor. And in the meantime, I was also singing in other choirs.
Great place to start, those schools and those choirs, and kind of getting those musical fundamentals down as you learn the breathing is so important at that young age, and to get the musical skill as well, and the ear trained young, so important.
Absolutely. And music education is so horribly undervalued in today's education system.
As a former public school educator, now a university professor and conductor, I can totally agree with you. It's so important that, and it gives people a chance, and not just to become musicians and professional performers, but a chance to connect with their humanity. And it's so important that we don't cut the hearts. So absolutely, I'm with you there. So when did you start taking private voice lessons?
I started to take voice lessons when I was 10, and then I started to study with my first opera teacher, Virginia Zeani, when I was 13.
Wow, so you really started very young.
I got bitten by the bug early.
That's great. And what were some of your first, what was your first role? And tell us about your growth as a young artist.
My first role was actually Barbarina in Le Notte di Figaro. I thought for a while that I was a soprano, although, as you can hear from my speaking voice, I'm clearly a mezzo. But that was my first.
It's always hard to, the mezzos, everyone's going to say, keep singing higher, you're actually a soprano, but it's based on the color, right? It's always the color of the timbre of the voice, not necessarily the notes.
Yes, the color and the tessitura.
And the mezzo, the mezzo register seems to just fit you so beautifully, and especially the Rossini repertoire, correct?
Yes, I love Rossini.
Boy, that time period in opera was fascinating when the mezzos were the leads, the romantic leads.
Absolutely, yes. I just sang my third Cenerentola with Fargo Moorhead Opera, and I've sung Rosina a few times, and of course I've worked with the brilliant Will Crutchfield at Caramore and Teatro Nuovo, and I had the privilege of being a young artist of the Accademia Rossiniana in 2014 with the late maestro Alberto Zedda.
Boy, Alberto Zeta was a legend in the field. And what are some of the things you took away from that experience?
I learned some of the principles of ornamenting Rossini, some of the performance practices, and that actually started me on the path to becoming a Rossini mezzo. I was still a soprano at that point. I didn't really know what I was doing vocally, but that really introduced me to singing more coloratura. And so I started to sing some of the Svischini soprano repertoire, some of the Colbran repertoire. And eventually I started to think that maybe I should just try the mezzo stuff. And that, of course, was where my voice should be, so to speak.
Once you lock in with the correct repertoire, it just makes sense, right? It just kind of feels correct.
Yes.
Now, did coloratura always come easy to your voice?
I started to sing some of it when I was a teenager. And of course, I had to work to make it more accurate and faster. But I did like it even when I first started to sing it. It was just something that I had to hone.
Takes time, right, to get comfortable with that type of the vocal pyrotechnics and all the great ornamentation. Now, did you have a lot of help with your ornamentation, or did you create your own ornamentation these days?
I started to do some of my own, even back then, for example, in 2013, 14, before I went to Pesaro to work in the Accademia Rossiniana. But then through working with Maestro Zedda and his contemporaries, and then working with Maestro Crutchfield and his colleagues, I really learned how to ornament Rossini properly. And nowadays I devise most of my own ornaments. Sometimes I listen to recordings and hear my colleagues and steal some things from them. And I still remember, of course, some of the ornaments on which Will and I worked. So it's a combination, but I love coming up with ornaments.
And you have so many decades of continuing that journey. And you start by working with lots of people who are specialists, and eventually, I guess, that just kind of going to come second nature.
Definitely.
So what are some of the most tricky roles you've sung to date?
Well, of course, Non più mesta is definitely a challenge for mezzo, but it's still something that I love to sing. And as I mentioned, I just sang that for the third time with Fargo Moorhead Opera. Actually, this time it was in English. I had previously sung it in Italian. And
who directed that? Who directed that production?
That was directed actually by the brilliant Maria Todaro.
I thought so. I was just going to say, shout out to Maria, who's been on the show, of course, and a dear, wonderful colleague. And boy, she's really just all over the place these days. So shout out Maria Todaro.
She's fantastic. I loved working with her.
It's a small world, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what were some of the challenges in that role? I mean, I'm always impressed with the amount of, with the directors who have a lot of physicality, and you've got to be able to sing all of the ornamentation on top of the physicality. Was that a tricky thing to master in this role?
I didn't necessarily find that tricky. I love that Maria incorporated a lot of physicality into the production. I actually find that a lot of fun. Of course, it took a while for me to memorize the English text when I had previously sung the Italian. And of course, in this translation, as in others, words are changed. I mean, in Italian, you might repeat the same line over and over again, but in the English translation, it's one line, different line, different line, different line. So I had to get rid of my Italian habit. But it was a good translation. I think it was by the late Beaumont Glass.
Interesting. I just did a La Boheme production, and we used an English translation, and it was a very modern take on it. So the English translation was a challenge. We changed a lot of words around, and it was the company that produced it does everything in English. So the whole cast was kind of like unusual because all the high notes, vowels change, and it really adapts the opera, makes it very different.
Definitely.
What was it like in English? Did it work? Did it eventually make sense, or was it? Did you enjoy it in Italian more? How did that feel to you?
I think that it worked really well, yes. And there were a lot of little girls in the audience who were dressed as Cinderella.
Oh,
And it was fun to meet them afterward. One gave me an adorable drawing of Cinderella. So I hope that they could and the text that we were singing. And of course, it's not the Cinderella story that they knew. But I mean, it was a great production for families. So I think that it works well in English.
that's beautiful. People don't realize that, but like 100 years ago, most of the operas were done in the language of the people. Like in Germany, all the operas in the smaller German houses would all be done in German, and in Sweden, same thing, and in Norway, same thing. So that's more like in the last like 75 to 100 years, it's become the performance practice, but it hasn't always been.
Exactly. No, I think that it's lovely to sing the operas in the various different languages. I mean, of course, sometimes it works to make a new take on an opera in English or to present something for families. But I am really glad that in general now we sing things in the original languages because the variety is wonderful.
And singers have to be very versatile these days, especially you're coming out of the young artist programs into the professional programs. What was it like as a young artist having? I'm always impressed by the schedule that young artists have to keep when they're doing their different residencies and the amount of performances and roles to master. Tell us about your experience in the young artist circuit.
I enjoyed it, definitely. Of course, some yaps had busier schedules than others, and when I needed to sing with a spaced out schedule, I just had to make sure to re-warm up, as I say, to vocalize again. I'm grateful that my voice has a lot of stamina to keep going and going and going. I simply have to be careful to warm up again if I've waited a long time. So that worked out, I think.
Now, which programs have you been in up to now?
In Caramur, 2 summers in a row, Teatro Nuovo, the Accademia Rossiniana, as I mentioned, Sarasota, and of course my beloved Fargo Moorhead Opera. I was one of their young artists last year, and I'm grateful that they had me back as a principal this year.
So tell us what it's like to grow through the young artist program and then come back as a principal artist. Tell us what that was like, and what was it like to take the stage as one of the principal artists?
I had an amazing experience, definitely. I mean, it was also lovely to be a young artist. Last year, we did our own young artist production of a contemporary work, Three-Way, by composer Robert Patterson and librettist David Cody. This side note, I actually met David a few months later when I sang a concert at the Players in New York and premiered some pieces by the brilliant Jeff Shankly, who was actually in the premiere of Cats by Andrew Lloyd Webber. He's now also a wonderful composer.
That's interesting.
And
I
it
didn't
was
know
wonderful
that.
to come back to FMO. Sorry.
I didn't realize that he was in Cats. That's amazing.
Yes, he was in the premiere of it in London. And we actually met through Instagram. That's one of the brilliant connections that I've made through social media. And yes, it was lovely to come back to FMO as a principal. It's a company that has a very warm, familial feeling. And David, the general director, is fantastic, very nice. He really knows voices. And Kevin Jutulin, the conductor, and of course, Maria.
It's a great team up there.
Absolutely.
So you have such a breadth of repertoire. Looking at your repertoire list and looking at your bio, so what's it like going back and forth between romantic and traditional opera to modern music?
I love the variety. I mean, all those different types of repertoire have different things to offer to the voice, and I think that it keeps the voice fresh to sing a wide variety of music.
What are some of the challenges? I know you're working on a couple different premieres at the moment. What do you have coming up?
Yes, actually, tomorrow I'll be singing a concert at the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius, the church that has graciously hosted many of Connecticut Lyric Opera's rehearsals for Giulio Cesare. By the way, I'm currently in Connecticut to sing Cesare with CLO. We had our opening performance yesterday at Trinity on Main, And there are 2 more opportunities to catch us in action. My cast will sing at the Gard Arts Center on May 15th, and the other cast will sing at the Bushnell's Severns Room on May 22nd. And yes, Maestro Adrian Sylvine and I will perform a short concert tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, and we will premiere Calling Us Home by composer Jane Kay and librettist Jermaine Shames. I'll also reprise Theodore Christman's Ave Maria and Songs for the People by Amy Scaria. She was gracious enough to write that piece last year for my concert of world premieres to benefit the American Prize. And a couple of other premieres that I have coming up will take place on June 4th. And then in late July, the June 4th piece will be Da Ponte by librettist Neil Cohen and composer whose credits include the theme music of Mozart in the Jungle. Neil is absolutely brilliant, and he devised this piece Da Ponte, loosely based, of course, on the life of the very charismatic Lorenzo da Ponte. And this is going to be a fun, informal concert premiere, concert reading in Accord, New York, too far from Phoenicia. And then my premiere after that will be La Malinche by Nathan Felix, and that's going to take place at the Albuquerque Museum on July 21st and 24th.
Fantastic. So it's exciting. You're so busy and doing such great breadth of different types of music. What's it like going back and forth between Giulio Cesare and then modern music? Do you have to shift gears there? Is it very easy? Is it easy for you?
I don't necessarily feel as if I have to shift gears. My warm-up is pretty much the same, but then of course I run through the different repertoire that I'm going to be singing. But I think that it's really good for the voice to sing a wide variety of repertoire. It's
really healthy. I know just saying the Rossini on the floor, the Fiatura, and get the voice moving like that. It's probably good for any style, right?
Definitely.
And tell us about the American Prize. You won the American Prize in 2020. Congratulations. That's quite an honor.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm really grateful for that. Actually, that's the reason why I offered to do a benefit concert for them. I, of course, found out about having won the American Prize in May 2020, and I did not have an opportunity to thank Meister David Katz, the director of the American Prize, in person. I wrote him a thank you note, and Sharon Sweet was one of the judges as well, and I wrote her a note, and both of them wrote lovely replies. But a few months later, I was thinking, it doesn't really feel complete that I haven't been able to thank them in person somehow, so I sort of wrote to David out of the blue with one of my many crazy ideas. But during the pandemic, I sort of became the queen of crazy ideas, as many of my colleagues know, and I offered to sing a benefit concert for them. And David liked the idea, and he graciously took me up on that offer. And I was planning to sing some standard repertoire as well as some premieres, because I had been in touch with composers who had sent me some scores, although I hadn't yet had an opportunity to premiere their music. And so when I was preparing for the concert, when it was a few months away from the date, which I guess was 1 year ago today, I wrote to my composer colleagues and asked whether they still wanted me to premiere any of their songs and arias. And the response was so wonderful that this actually became a concert of 8 world premieres.
That's so exciting. And we have Jermaine Shames watching the show, who just commented and sending his love. So it's great to have people out there.
Oh, hello, Jermaine.
I just love the community that comes on these calls. It's not uncommon that we'll have like an opera legend just show up and mention. It's just like always blows my mind. But that's the great thing about the internet.
Jermaine and sorry.
Please, you go first.
Jermaine and Amy Scaria, one of the composers whom I mentioned, are also working on a new project. I guess that I can mention it here because Amy mentioned it on Facebook. It's Katja on Mount Unsen. Jermaine wrote this beautiful text. It's based on the life and the final moments, really, of volcanologist Katja Kraft. And Jermaine and Amy are also hoping to turn it into an opera at some point. So this is really going to be exciting when we have a chance to premiere it.
There's so much great opera being written, and it's just great to see new teams form and the next generation keep this art form alive and vibrant.
Absolutely.
Very exciting. So, where do you see opera going as someone coming into the professional world and starting to make their imprint on the world? How is it different than maybe it was in the times before?
Well, I think that it has definitely changed a great deal since COVID hit. Um, and I hope that as live performances return, we'll be able to have the best of both worlds. It's definitely great that we've been able to make a lot of new contacts that we might not have been able to make before. Um, However, there is no substitute for live performance, especially, I have to say, for a singer whose voice doesn't really come across as well in recordings as in person. Unfortunately, I happen to have that problem. Um, it it definitely makes some auditions tricky. But yes, there have been some good things that have come from making these virtual connections. But I definitely hope that things will turn back more and more to live performances without losing these wonderful opportunities that we have to connect virtually.
Well, the amazing thing about the internet and what we can do on these type of platforms is eliminate geography and synchronous time. So if you do a performance, let's say in Fargo, Moorhead, not everyone's going to be able to come to that, but maybe some of that concert can live on and be seen by people across the world who couldn't come to that specific place. So that's an interesting kind of take on that. Like the Met broadcasts or have a life of their own, certainly, and have taught us that. But I think there's this, there's nothing like being in the opera house and feeling the decibel levels of the voices off the stage and feeling the passion and the atoms in the air as they're vibrating. There's nothing like it.
Absolutely, yes.
So tell us, I always tell people on the show that, I think the COVID period made everyone a philosopher because we had so much more time without the travel and the rehearsals and our life changed so quickly. What was it like for you? And how did you, what did you walk away with after COVID?
Well, when it comes to singing, I can't be still. I can't be inactive for too much time. I have to be working on a professional project. So for the first few weeks of the pandemic, I was thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's actually when I joined Instagram. I hadn't been on it previously because I hadn't known how to use it. I hadn't thought that I had the time. But I joined Instagram and started out by making a couple of funny singing related videos. And I started to brew these crazy ideas for virtual collaborations. And so that's how I was coping for the first few months of COVID. And I put it out there for people to know that I was ready, willing, and able to travel for auditions, concerts, productions, you name it, I wanted to sing it. And so that I think helped me to be able to get back into the live performance scene pretty early, and I'm really, really grateful for that.
Nothing can replace that. So tell us about some of your funny videos, and how did you coming up with content and becoming a content creator is really a tough thing. People don't realize it's not just something you just kind of. It takes time to plan that out. I know I had never been on Instagram. Also, but when I started the podcast, we actually used to promo and to get it out there. But I find it's a very viable audience that people really kind of follow, and it's very hot right now.
Definitely. Yes, I admit that I spend an inordinate amount of time on each post. But I really want to be able to share what I'm doing and to meet people whom I otherwise wouldn't be able to meet. But yes, my first funny video was part of the La Speranza challenge. Of course, a couple of years ago, the challenge was to sing those phrases from Che gelida manina. And first of all, I sang it in the tenor's octave. And secondly, I did it in a plank position. Every day I do a little bit of my first warm-up in a plank position. And so I thought that maybe that could possibly be something to make people laugh, during something that was a very, very difficult time. And then my second one was from La Cenerentola. I called it High on Opera or High on Coloratura. And I sang each of the four phrases of Parlar Pensar, standing on a different high place. One was a 6-foot wall that separated my parents' house from their neighbor's house, and one was the roof of my parents' house. Um, so yes, a couple of crazy
I
opera
love it.
videos.
You know what? That's there can be a perception of, like, I teach undergraduates, so many of whom never don't know nothing about opera. So I always make them watch some Wagner. We talk, when we break it down, they understand what's happening, and compare that to Puccini's La Boheme. We kind of understand why it makes it so interesting and so much fun. And it helps to be an advocate for the art, because we have to encourage the artists and the young people to come to opera, or there won't be an audience. It's so important that people are out there, demystifying the art form.
Absolutely. And there's this misconception that opera is elitist or cold. There's definitely a misconception that opera is cold and emotionless, but opera is about passion. It's about amplifying these human emotions, and it's about empathy. I mean, so many of these operas were ahead of the times in which they were written, and they were written in order to make people see outcasts really as human beings. I mean, La Traviata, for example.
Yep, and then taken from great source material, and to see this character go through those transformations, and it's there's nothing like opera. I mean, you go to in Italy, you go to the outdoor festivals. The farmers take off their boots and they go to see the show outdoors. It's not just for the elite; it's for everybody, and I think that's really important. That art can be for everybody.
Definitely.
And we keep on keeping it alive. So, yeah, what else? What's something that you found in COVID that you maybe didn't know about yourself that you learned?
Probably, as I mentioned, the ability to come up with ideas to keep my schedule busy when it otherwise was not. I had previously been very grateful to have project after project after project. And then when that wasn't the case, I had to improvise.
Nothing like being ready, and it's always prepared, right? We were talking before the show that as a young person coming up, you always have to be prepared and be a good colleague.
Absolutely. Yes, those two are very important things that are sometimes overlooked.
And as a conductor, I can say that they're some of the most important. Know your music, be a good colleague.
Yes, 100%.
So, what advice would you have for young artists who are getting ready to start that journey, maybe in conservatory, and get ready to make that leap up to the next level? What advice would you have?
I would say, if this is your dream, stick with it. I know that the road can be hard, but if you really can't envision yourself being happy doing anything else, go for it. Pursue it with vim and vigor. And yes, if you really care about it, learn your music, memorize your music, come prepared.
How did you get were languages easier for you, or something you worked through really hard throughout your career?
They came to me when I had been singing in them for a while. I was not quite as fast to pick up languages when I hadn't been singing them. But then when I had started to sing in Italian, German, French, and other languages, I would recognize, I would know words when I was learning the grammar, and then they came much more quickly.
Takes time, right? It takes repetition and practice.
Absolutely.
And I always tell people on the show, we've had many famous singers on the show, talk about the team. It takes a whole team to make a singer's career, right? The combination of the agent, the coaches, the teachers. How important it is for you?
They're very important. Yes, of course, the foundation of a career in opera is a solid technique. And maybe different people have different levels of natural ability, but I mean, whatever level You have it first, you need to build on it, you need to hone your technique, you need a technique that will allow you to have a busy schedule and to withstand long days of singing, etc., etc. And you need to learn the aspects of style, the different styles of the many different types of opera. And of course, you need to get out there. You need auditions, you need to book performances, and Yap Tracker is great, but that's also where management comes in.
The next level up from the Yap Tracker is getting the agents push you for those first auditions for the professional companies to find those first roles and to start those wheels in motion. It's so critical.
Absolutely. And then, of course, as you said, being a good colleague so that people will rehire you and recommend you when asked. And so that, in this world, in this industry in which there are so many singers vying for spots and there can be a lot of negativity, I mean, it's just always best to be nice and to treat other people with respect.
What advice do you have for people coming up about dealing with rejection, which is such an important part of all musical professions, but particularly for singers, I find?
I think that it's important to recognize the subjectivity. Actually, if it would not be considered inappropriate, I would want in an audition to say, I'm going to sing this aria, but please tell me if you'd like me to change anything about it, if you'd like me to use more or less articulation in the coloratura, or if you'd like me to sing with brighter or darker vowels, or if you'd like me to use chest voice differently. I'm grateful that my technique allows me to be very flexible. But of course, if I were to say that in an audition, people would consider me bonkers. So yes, my advice would be to remember that it's exceedingly subjective.
That's a good point. I mean, people are so personalize these things. I mean, I certainly am in my 40s. I've been up for a lot of jobs, and I've gotten some, and I haven't gotten lots. And it's not, and sometimes has nothing to do with you at all. Like they could have loved your singing, and they may be thinking about you for the next show down the road, but they already had this tenor cast, and the tenor was taller or shorter, or who knows, right? There's so many factors that goes into casting, right? And you can't know them all.
Exactly. What goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and all you can do is control your performance, right?
That's definitely true.
What is some of what have some of your favorite experiences been on the operatic stage? Give us a few of those mountaintop experiences at this point in your career.
Oh, wow. Well, definitely these performances of Giulio Cesare, as well as my recent performances of Cinderella with FMO, and singing with the Rossini Opera Festival, Delia in Il Viaggio a Reims, when I was a baby, so to speak. And in 2017, singing Ernesta in Un avvertimento ai gelosi, one of Manuel Garcia's salon operas at Caramoor. And I actually could go on and on and on with the opera experiences. But something else that I'd like to mention is the collaboration that I've recently begun with Grey Team. May is Military Appreciation Month, by the way. And last summer, I began this collaboration with Grey Team. It's a veterans organization based in Boca Raton, Florida. And I gave a little concert there, a private concert. And I started this initiative called Voices of the Valiant, in which veterans would submit poetry, and I would pair them with composers who would set the veterans' poetry to music, and then I would perform those pieces. And the main purpose of this collaboration is to encourage veterans to be more open about those experiences, because a lot of people, of course, really don't understand, can't understand. And I've learned a lot from working with them, and it's truly an unforgettable experience.
What a wonderful project, and so great that you're involved in these things and you're thinking ahead. And yeah, it's such a problem with the veterans coming back, and how do you deal with the kind of the trauma that they went through and the challenges they went through? I think that's so important to help. And music has that universal appeal to kind of help us connect with our emotions. I think it's a very powerful initiative.
Thank you. Yes, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to work with Grey Team. And they're an amazing organization, by the way. If you'd like to check out greyteam.org, they have this fantastic technology to help veterans to recover from physical and mental trauma.
Well, it's great to give back, especially with the art form that you love. We have a question from the audience. This is Marty from Boca Raton. As we were speaking of Florida, it's nice to be, and you're originally from Florida. It's wonderful. So tell us, he asks, who are some of your favorite mezzos of the past?
Oh, wow. Probably too many to list. I would definitely say sort of contemporary mezzos. Jennifer Larmore is amazing, and she's still performing. And as for mezzos from the past, I do like Marilyn Horne very much. And a lot of contemporary mezzos are actually coming to mind, and I'm thinking now of a lot of Rossini mezzos, Cecilia Bartoli, Joyce Di Donato. So yes, sorry, it's hard for me to pick favorites. I mean, there are so many wonderful singers to whom I love to listen.
There's so many great artists to choose from, right? And the next ones like yourself are on the way to the top. So we're excited to see that. And we're really excited with what you're doing and continued success. How can people find out more about you and your work?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Madison Marie McIntosh. That's my Facebook ID as well. And my Facebook name is Madison Marie McIntosh Mezzo-soprano. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can check out my Lombardo Associates page. That's my management. And one concert that I should also mention is going to happen this coming Monday. It's a benefit concert for Ukraine that will take place at Bruno Walter Auditorium at Lincoln Center, presented by Melody with a Mission, and a virtual concert to benefit Ukraine Artists for Peace, presented by Opera Cecilia.
That is so important, and thank you for reminding us that how important it is that we support the Ukrainian effort. We just had one of the principal artists from the Ukrainian National Opera who's in Kiev right now. He was on our show last week, and he couldn't turn his lights on because he didn't want to be picked out by a sniper or blown up. I mean,
oh no!
I mean, he stayed in the country because all of those top opera singers from their country are singing for the troops to keep morale high.
No, that's wonderful, but how horrible that he has to live, that anyone has to live in that situation.
It really made it real for me. His name is Dmitry Ahiev, and Dmitry has sung all over the world. He's sung at Carnegie Hall. He's been on many of the world stages, and to hear that our colleagues who are, he was so touched. It was really a fascinating conversation because I said, if you could ask Vladimir Putin why, and he just said, we don't know why. Why are you doing this to us? And it really is shocking for us all, and we, the artists, have to do we have to do what we can to help these people who are our colleagues.
Absolutely.
Well, a somber tone indeed, but I'm glad that you're doing that. And Bruno Walter Auditorium is a wonderful place. So, what's the date of that concert?
That's this coming Monday, May 9th.
Wonderful. Right around the corner. So Connecticut to New York City will keep you on the road, and good luck with all of your upcoming performances and collaborations. And we can't wait to meet you in person and to see you on the stage.
Thank you very much. Well, it has been lovely to meet you virtually, and thank you for having me on this terrific podcast.
Continued success, Madison. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. And we have a wonderful array of guests coming up in June, July, and August, so be sure to check us out to see what's coming up next. And remember, keep music alive.